Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. Before we get too far into it, I just want to remind you, tomorrow is the Listener DMs episode. Every Friday, which is the most listened to episode of the week, by the way, I take a deep dive through my inbox and I'll read basically whatever you guys send to me. It could be a question, could be a comment, it could be a story, it could be something you want more of or less of. I love your feedback, and tomorrow I will do that on Listener DMs. If you want to slide into my DMs, no problem. Find me at Scott Fox on air on most social media platforms. Today, it's actually going to be kind of an interesting episode of After 9, almost a little bit of an experiment that I didn't know I was going to do. You see, when I set up every day to do the pod, I've got a whole folder of audio that I want to play for you. Audio that I think you should hear that will help you understand the news and why it's being presented to you the way it is. Today, my folder is all mixed up. For whatever reason, all the clips have shown up in random order. So I'm going to go with that. And I know that it might jump around a little bit today, but I promise you there is a lot of info in this audio that you should hear coming up on this episode. So I hope it's not too jarring. Try and follow along if you can, because I'm going to touch a lot of different topics on this episode. You give me a little bit of your time today, and I'm going to get you completely caught up on a number of different issues. Today, we're going to talk about some of the drama that's happening in Alberta and in Ontario. In Ontario, they've passed a new law that allows the province to get rid of the elected school board trustees and have a government appointed person look after the school boards and make sure that the money is being spent responsibly. Well, that has led to a lot of different protests. And here's why. You get a conservative government in power, and they want to make even a hair of a change to education, and the education union is going to be all over them. And are they right to be all over the government in this case? We'll talk about that. Meanwhile, out in Alberta, Premier Danielle Smith has announced she's going to use the Notwithstanding Clause to pass 3 laws that have a direct impact on transgender youth in Alberta. We're going to talk about that, and you'll hear from Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. I'm also going to play some audio for you from yesterday, the NASA news conference on the comet 3I Atlas. And I'm going to give you a spoiler alert. They are doubling down. They're pretty sure it's a comet. But the guy who for a while now has been trying to convince people this isn't a comet, it's an alien ship, Professor Avi Loeb from Harvard University. He is going to come out and call BS on what NASA said yesterday. Lots of great audio. I've also got some U.S. President Donald Trump. I've got stuff on the Epstein files and a whole bunch more in this episode of After 9. So let's jump into it. There's a lot of rumors circulating right now that as soon as he gets back from his trip to the UAE and South Africa, Prime Minister Mark Carney is going to go to Alberta, where he and Premier Danielle Smith are going to announce they're finally doing it. They're building a pipeline. That's something that a lot of folks have been calling for, myself included. I think it makes sense to do that. We've got to take all that Alberta oil and get it out to the coast and get it into tankers and ship it around the world so that we can begin to become more prosperous as a Canadian people. Well, you know who doesn't like that idea and doesn't like the idea of pipelines at all is the government of British Columbia and the leader of the Federal Green Party, Elizabeth May. I don't think we've had a week in After 9 history with this much Elizabeth May in it. But I've got to play Liz here for you, because yesterday she gave an interesting comment when she was standing outside the House of Commons. Elizabeth May does not want to see pipelines built, and she just traded her vote on the budget for green initiatives. She says she believes Mark Carney when Mark Carney says Canada will hit its Paris Climate Accord targets by 2030. She believes him. But how can we do that if there's a massive investment in the budget into fossil fuel initiatives and he's about to announce we're building a pipeline? That does not sit well with Elizabeth May. Here's her speaking yesterday.
There is no chance in God's green earth that there's ever going to be an oil tanker up the BC North Coast. In case you've never heard of it, the inner waters between Haida Gwaii and the coast of Canada, the west coast of Canada, is something called the Hecate Strait. You should look it up. It's the most dangerous body of water on the Canadian coastline, according to the Government of Canada, and the fourth most dangerous body of water on Earth. It has tides and currents that are extraordinary, 10 to 30 meters. They sometimes go down so low that they expose the ocean floor. That's why there's been a tanker moratorium on our north coast since 1972. And you can't wish away the science. And you can't pretend an oil tanker isn't going to break apart and contaminate the coasts, sloshing back and forth oil between the north coast of the mainland of British Columbia and the east coast of Haida Gwaii. The Haida Nation will never stand for it. British Columbians will never stand for it. They're not just barking up the wrong tree, they're barking up the wrong forest.
Okay, Elizabeth May drawing a line in the sand saying absolutely not. There will be no oil tankers going in between Haida Gwaii and the coast of the rest of Canada, West Coast, saying it's not going to happen. Well, I think the Premier of Alberta and the Prime Minister are going to disagree with Liz, because if we build this pipeline, there's going to have to be tankers. You know, we're heading into a very interesting time, and I'm very, very curious to see how this goes. In fact, make some popcorn, everybody. Here's what's going to happen. The Prime Minister is going to come out and announce that they are building a pipeline from Alberta to British Columbia. Now, that puts those on the left in a very difficult position, because traditionally they supported Justin Trudeau when Trudeau said, absolutely not, we're not doing it. Okay, well, Carney's gonna, and that's going to fracture some of the folks on the left. Some of them are going to get behind it like they were in favor of pipelines all along. Some of them will. And they're going to cheer on Mark Carney as he does it, because that's part of his Build Canada Strong initiative. And this one, I fully support. We need that pipeline. But then others are going to break off. And I'm wondering, after the Liberals spent this week raving about the greatness of Elizabeth May, leader of the Green Party, because she supported their budget, if they try and ram through this pipeline, that's going to put them at odds with Elizabeth May, and she will turn on Prime Minister Carney. I'm wondering, are you Liberals still going to be that supportive of Elizabeth May when she fiercely goes after your guy, Mark Carney? And are you going to all of a sudden be in favor of pipelines, even though you've likely been opposed to pipelines for a very, very long time? Interesting times ahead, ladies and gentlemen. I am very, very curious to see where it goes. Either way, though, interesting audio from Elizabeth May, who says there will never be an oil tanker between Haida Gwaii and the west coast of Canada. Never. Well, those are Canadian waters, and we're going to have some tough decisions to make soon, and I'm really curious to see where it goes. Moving on. Next topic. Let's get to what's happening in Alberta right now. I'm going to spend a few minutes on this one because I think it's a topic that we can all hear, understand, and form an opinion on. Premier Smith has announced she's going to invoke the Notwithstanding Clause to pass 3 bills protecting parental rights and women's rights in sports. Listen to Premier Smith.
Our government is introducing Bill 9, the Protecting Alberta's Children Statutes Amendment Act. Bill 9 will invoke the Canadian Charter's Notwithstanding Clause and to amend and uphold 3 critical pieces of legislation without further court delay or uncertainty. The Health Statutes Amendment Act 2024, the Education Amendment Act 2024, and the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act 2024. The Notwithstanding Clause will apply to the following pieces of legislation. Bill 26, the Health Statute Amendment Act 2024 prohibits both gender reassignment surgery for children under 18 and the provision of puberty blockers and hormone replacement treatments for the purpose of gender reassignment to children under 16. Bill 27, the Education Amendment Act 2024, requires schools to obtain parental consent when a student under 16 years of age wishes to change his or her name or pronouns for reasons related to the student's gender identity, and requires parental opt-in consent to teaching on gender identity, sexual orientation, or human sexuality. Bill 29, the Fairness and Safety in Sport Act, requires the governing bodies of amateur competitive sports in Alberta to implement policies that limit participation in women's and girls' sports to those who were born female. We have heard from families, teachers, athletes, coaches, and young people themselves, and we respect that there are strong feelings on every side of this conversation. We have also consulted with medical professionals here and in other jurisdictions and learned how standards of care and best practices to support children and families have evolved with new research over time. As a government, we have a responsibility to provide clarity, a responsibility to protect all children and youth, and a responsibility to give parents, not institutions or courts, the primary role in life-changing decisions about their children.
I'm going to pause the Premier right there and just do a little recap for what the Premier said. She's going to use the Notwithstanding Clause to protect 3 pieces of legislation. What those 3 pieces of legislation do are this. Anyone under 18 will not be able to have a gender reassignment surgery. Transgender folks will not be able to, until they've reached adult age, undergo a gender reassignment and become the opposite sex. They will also not be able to use puberty blockers before 16, I'm led to believe, because the Premier, well, I'll let the Premier explain why she wants that, and that's coming up in just a second. So no gender reassignment surgeries for minors. If a kid wants to be called by different pronouns at school, that requires parental consent. Now, that's the opposite of the way it's being done in many other places where the school won't even tell the parents that their kid has requested to use different pronouns at school. And the third piece of this is biological males are restricted and they will not be able to compete against biological females in sports after a certain age. How do you feel about that? Because for some reason, this is getting very controversial, and I think that those are very common sense things. I've heard the Premier argue these points before, and I do happen to agree with her. I'm open to change and I'm open to compromise, but so far the argument I've heard from the Premier makes sense. No puberty blockers until someone has actually gone through puberty and reached sexual maturity. No gender reassignment until you're old enough to make the adult decision to carry on with that life-changing surgery. No, we're not going to let biological males compete against biological females in sports. And if a kid wants to use different pronouns at school, the parents have to be informed and have to consent to that. Some people feel that's an attack on transgender rights. Let's get into more of what Premier Smith had to say.
This government does not turn to the Notwithstanding Clause unless the stakes warrant it. And in this case, the stakes could not be higher. This is one of the most consequential actions our government will take during our time in office. The Notwithstanding Clause is part of Canada's system of parliamentary democracy. It exists to balance the power of the courts and the authority of democratically elected governments. By invoking it, we're keeping these decisions in the hands of those who are directly accountable to Albertans and ensuring these protections can move forward without further court delay or uncertainty. These measures reflect the views of an overwhelming majority of Albertans, and it is our responsibility to make sure that they are not overturned. This is not a hypothetical discussion. This suite of legislation is in active litigation right now. At this moment, we have 3 lawsuits working their way through the courts with 1 injunction in place. These lawsuits could take years to resolve, including possible appeals to the Supreme Court. These delays are not acceptable to this government when children are in harm's way. We want every young Albertan to receive the mental health supports, the compassion, and the guidance that they need at home, at school, and in their communities. We also want adults to receive the care and support they need to live the life that they choose. This legislation is not about denying care. We cannot and will not take the risk of a child undergoing medical, hormonal, or surgical interventions that could permanently limit or eliminate the choices they may want to make as an adult to have children of their own one day. Before I wrap up, I do want to speak directly to young Albertans who are navigating what their identity means through the already difficult process of growing up. You deserve dignity, understanding, and support. We will never stop working to keep you safe. You belong in Alberta. We firmly believe that. We also believe it's our duty to protect you. This legislation is about your future. So when the time comes, you have every opportunity to make the adult decisions that are rightfully yours and yours alone.
Does that sound to you like somebody who is compassionate and someone who understands the issue and someone who just wants to make sure that kids have all options in front of them when they're an adult and able to make adult decisions? Or does she sound anti-trans? Because there's a lot of folks who, as soon as any government steps in and tries to legislate around trans issues, will accuse you of being anti-trans. I don't think she sounds anti-trans at all. I think that's a very reasonable thing and probably a good use of the Notwithstanding Clause. Where the courts and the democratically elected government disagree, somebody's got to make a decision here, and the government has decided this is an appropriate place to use the Notwithstanding Clause to make sure that A, decisions get made quickly before anybody makes a decision on their own that is going to have life-altering consequences. She says this is about protecting youth. Okay. I can get behind that. Sure. We have a minimum age for a lot of things. It's the age of majority. And you can't make certain decisions until you reach that age, including voting, by the way. And eventually, those who are affected by this will have the ability to vote. The premier got asked a question about whether or not she is anti-trans or being anti-trans when she was doing that news conference. I want to play this exchange for you. It's about a minute and a half long.
We just heard from some folks outside that feel that this legislation and the use of the Notwithstanding Clause is not in the best interest of kids. And we heard from young people, we heard from trans folks who were once young people and accessed this gender affirming care. So what would your message be to them who say that this is hurting them and hurting the future of children?
Well, kids have to go through puberty in order to be able to have kids. That's just the way it is. This is becoming sexually mature means. And we want to make sure that at the age of 16, when they're old enough to be able to make these decisions for themselves and understand the full consequences of it, they can begin that journey. But we know that when we have all kinds of laws on those who are under the age of 15, we don't allow them to smoke. We don't allow them to drive alone. We don't allow them to do drugs. We don't allow them to sign contracts. They can't get a credit card. They can't even go on a field trip to the zoo without getting their parents' permission. So if we accept that we have to be able to have a certain level of rigor over those who are minors, 15 years of age and younger, then we have to have that rigor. And if they are contemplating making permanent changes to their ability to have kids, permanent changes to their body, those decisions have to be made when they're mature enough to understand the consequences of that. So I think that we're on solid ground with the parents who are concerned about their kids. We're on solid ground with the general public. And that's the reason why we've decided to take this action.
You know, it still shocks me that it was even contemplated that decisions like that could be made at school and hidden from the parents. And the argument is there's some parents who will not receive that information very well, that their kid wants to use different pronouns or wants to transition or be a different gender at school. There's some parents who won't like that and may possibly become abusive or what have you against the kid at home. And that's the argument for not telling the parents. As a parent of two kids who have gone through school and one more who's in school, I couldn't imagine something like that going on and that being intentionally kept from me by the school. I just can't imagine that being a thing, that schools are hiding information from parents. I can't reconcile that in my head. I think that's bizarre. And it seems like Alberta is pretty confident in their position when they say they're going to use the Notwithstanding Clause to make sure that parents' rights are protected, if that's the right word. I don't know, parents' rights, to make sure that kids are not on puberty blockers before 16 and not undergoing gender reassignment surgery until 18. And the one that is of most interest to me, making sure that biological males are not allowed to compete against biological females in sports. I think that there are so many biological differences that give it can create a dangerous situation. And I'm saying that as someone who oversees a fairly significant sporting body. That's where I'm going to leave this topic here. But hey, you've heard the arguments now, and hopefully you understand a little bit more about where Alberta's government is coming from. Meanwhile, in Ontario, big dust up yesterday in the legislature. The leader of the NDP got kicked out of the legislature because she called the Doug Ford government corrupt and refused to withdraw the comment when the speaker gave her the opportunity to withdraw. So they kicked her out of the House. Marit Stiles is her name, leader of the Ontario NDP. This is all over a new bill that gives the province the authority, among other things, to get rid of elected school board trustees and replace them with what they call a supervisor who's going to make sure that the money is spent appropriately if it turns out those trustees are squandering money, if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing as a school board trustee. Now, before I begin here, I'm going to tell you, I actually agree with the province on this one. To me, it makes sense to have democratically elected individuals having some influence over the school board, or at one point it did. I'm not sure that it does anymore, and frankly, we pay a heck of a lot of money for this added layer of government, the elected school board trustees, and frankly, I'm not sure what most of them do. I think a lot of them come to that job with an agenda or something that they want to implement that isn't even necessarily implementable. I don't even think most of them fully understand what the position is when they get elected to the school board. So I don't know that we even really need it. And some people are saying, well, the government is going to give this supervisor of the school board that they appoint a massive salary, $300,000 plus a year, and a $40,000 expense account, and that's a waste of money. Not really, because they're saving the salary from those elected school board trustees. And depending on the board, some of those trustees make pretty good money. So it's become contentious, and it is anytime the province wants to make changes in education. Again, the leader of the Ontario NDP got kicked out of the legislature yesterday over her comments in the legislature. Well, she spoke afterwards. She did a little selfie video in her office. Here's a little bit of Marit Stiles.
Hey everybody. So today I got kicked out of the legislature for calling Doug Ford and his government corrupt. Actually, I was kicked out of the chamber of the legislature. And you know what? I stand by it. Of course I do. But look, this isn't about me. It's about the real cost of this corruption. It's about people, right? The young dad who eats a little less so his kids can eat a little more. The student who's graduating with an enormous debt but no job prospects. The grandma who's watching the news every day and thinking about her grandkids' future. The laid off auto workers who told me that they're turning their action center into an emergency food bank. Like this corruption, these pay-to-play schemes of this government, it has a real cost. A real cost. And I want to say that I don't understand why Doug Ford and his conservatives are turning their backs on people, but I do. It's because for them, it's always been about themselves, about the people they know. They help the people who help them. And for that kind of politician, that's all power means to them. So yeah, I called it corrupt because it is. And look, I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm going to do it all over again. And I'm going to fight every single day. And I won't stop until that dad doesn't have to skip meals, or that student has a job waiting for them, or until that grandma doesn't have to worry anymore about her grandkids' future, until union halls don't also have to be emergency food banks, until everyone has a government that makes their lives better. That's what this fight means to me. And you know what? I know that that's what this fight means to you, too. So let's keep fighting.
Okay. Listen, when it comes to the NDP, and that one wasn't specifically about the education bill, but yes, the NDP is hopping mad about that, among other things. I find it very interesting that the New Democrats, and I get that this is the provincial version, not the federal version, but the NDP is the NDP is the NDP. Full stop. They are calling Doug Ford corrupt, but had absolutely no issue whatsoever with what Justin Trudeau did for 10 years in this country. Doug Ford is corrupt because people are now lined up at food banks and can't get jobs. They want to blame that just on Doug Ford and the PC government without even a word at Justin Trudeau. The NDP kept Justin Trudeau in power through what, 2 elections? Most of the issues in this country have to do with the federal government, and the NDP propped them up the entire way. They allowed it to happen. They allowed Justin Trudeau to make a complete and total mockery of democracy in this country, and a lot of people agree he ruined it. Now, she's suggesting that Doug Ford is corrupt. I know that, right or wrong, there's a lot of people that believe that. There's a lot of people who have seen enough and heard enough, and there's enough scandals that they think, oh yeah, this guy is corrupt. I'm not here to cast a judgment on Doug Ford. I'm simply pointing out the irony that it is preposterous for the NDP to accuse anybody of being corrupt when they themselves are the reason that Canada is in the situation they're in, because they teamed up with the Liberals and the federal government for 10 years tried to bankrupt the middle class. Now, back to that particular education issue. Here is yesterday in the Ontario legislature, the education minister, Paul Calandra.
What the NDP is doing, what the Liberals are doing, is they're supporting a system that was created in the one-room schoolhouse era. You know what has to happen? We have to reinvigorate our school system, building on the successes of previous ministers to bring our curriculum back in order. In a very short period of time, members will be able to get up in this House and vote in favour of Bill 33. And what that will allow us to do is put school boards back on track when they go off the rails. What the NDP and the Liberals want me to do is allow a board to collapse before I step in to the benefit of parents. I won't do that. I'm going to step in earlier. We'll put boards back on track and put students, parents, and teachers first. No matter how much they whine and complain, we'll get it done for the students.
Okay, strong words there from the education minister, but I think it's very clear now he's going ahead with that, and there's no changing it. In fact, the law has passed, and the province can step in when a school goes rogue, or a school board goes rogue, or trustees go rogue, or they're abusing taxpayer money with their expense accounts, and so on and so forth. I don't know that it's necessarily a bad idea to have that extra check and balance against these school board trustees who, by and large, get left alone to do whatever they want. And I don't know that anybody was necessarily keeping track of what they're up to. Now they are. These school board trustees are on notice. The government is paying attention to how money is spent. If there's only so much money for education, I think it would be best spent in the classroom. I think it would be much better spent at the school level, providing supports for kids who need it, making sure that we have those smaller class sizes, making sure that students have all the tech and resources they need to thrive in 2025. Not being wasted ordering milkshakes and cheeseburgers in the middle of the night by school board trustees who may or may not even care that that's their job. They probably don't care in some cases. They're just there for a check or to say that they're elected, or this is the closest they're going to come to having any power in life. So they decided to take a shot at running for the school board, and they actually won. I don't necessarily think this is a bad idea. And I think that rather than get caught up in all the noise, because the media covers the protests, they're going to show you nonstop pictures of people walking around with signs outside Queen's Park and freaking out about how terrible this is. Just keep in mind, there's a reason the government put that in place, and I personally am going to give them enough leeway to see where this goes. And you know what? If it turns out this is incredible government overreach, well, it should be fairly easy to undo this. The other thing I like about this particular law that the government passed is it paves the way to have school resource officers back in school. Under a different government in a more woke time, it was determined that the police should have no place in the schools. And it was suggested that some students are afraid of the police, or they're traumatized when they see the police, and so on and so forth because of their background. And I'm sure you've probably heard about this. This allows those police officers to go back in the school. As someone who worked very, very closely on the School Crime Stoppers program way back in the day, that was something that I cared a lot about because it empowered students to directly report crime happening in their school, safety issues in their school. I thought it was great. And I saw firsthand what those school resource officers were able to do in the way of working with students, building relationship with students, and building trust with students. It's not a bad thing to have police officers occasionally in the schools. And I'm really not sure why we got rid of it, but frankly, things have been going poorly ever since we got rid of those resource officers in the schools. So put them back, and maybe we can correct a few things that have gone off the rails here lately. Moving on again, trying to fit as much audio into this episode as possible. The topic of immigration has come up once again. Yesterday, during a committee hearing, it was revealed how people who are declaring refugee status do it when they come to Canada. Now, typically, they would fly to Canada, or they would show up at a land crossing and they would say, I would like to declare refugee status, or I need asylum. And we would do a brief investigation. The officer would make a determination on the spot. Okay, sounds legit, or no, that's not a reason to declare yourself a refugee. Get out of here. And if they have a legitimate claim, they'd be allowed to come into the country while we investigate. Well, it seems to be taking a hell of a long time to investigate most of these claims. And now we're a little closer to understanding why. I'm going to play this for you, but I'm going to warn you right now, this is completely bananas. This is going to shock you to the core that this is how our immigration system is working. Listen very carefully to yesterday's committee hearing. This is a Liberal member of Parliament answering a question.
In essence, to speed things up, because we are short-staffed, we're allowing people into the country without first doing that security screening.
Okay, hold on a second here. So you're saying that a refugee claimant coming to Canada goes to a machine and says, I want to be a refugee in Canada, hits a button, and they're in the country? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's not a machine, it's an application. So the one-touch system, they're given instructions on how to use that. That connects directly with IRCC, and they're given that documentation to complete on their own once they're in the country. We're not doing that. So
basically, they take out their phone, theoretically, and they tap it a few times, and they are now in the country as a refugee accepted by our country.
Yes, we get some basic data from them, and again, we do the biometrics. But beyond that, they're doing that on their own, yes.
Are you serious? Are you kidding me that anybody can show up at the border, claim they're a refugee, they open up this app and fill out that form, and then they get refugee status until we determine otherwise? And apparently that can take a couple of years to investigate each individual claim. And once they become a refugee, then they get access to our healthcare system. If they have kids, the kids can use our education system. They get money from the government. They're able to work. All of these things are happening. And there's not even a human interaction. They just go on an app, declare they're a refugee, and we take their word for it. And they get all of that taxpayer-funded stuff, including taxpayer money. I'm completely and totally shocked that that's how the Liberal government has been running our immigration system. I cannot think of anything less secure and more compromising than that. We could be in real danger here. Who the hell knows who they let in? I mean, if they just had to use an app, who are these people? We could have terrorists. We could have people, members of organized crime. We could have any number of people that have just shown up at the airport, said I'm a refugee, tapped a few things on the app, and they're in. And they're getting taxpayer money and resources. It's bananas. This is crazy. Tell me you agree that that's crazy.
Yes, we get some basic data from them, and again, we do the biometrics. Beyond that, they're doing that on their own, yes.
So no human interaction. Your members do not ask any questions, don't confirm anything. It's a free-for-all into the country that way?
Very little. I don't know if I'd use the term free-for-all, but for the most part, it's self-declaration on the claimant's part, yes.
And so from your perspective and your members' perspective, this is not a good thing?
This is a terrible thing. It's during the interview, and again, I spoke to it in my opening statement about human interaction. That's where we ask follow-up questions. That's where we establish whether there's coaching, whether it's a legitimate claim. That's how those files are built so they can be dealt with properly. Later, that's where we gain that intelligence, and that's currently been lost, not to mention that about 10% never complete the forms through One Touch. So you figure with about 100,000 claimants a year, that's about 10,000 people who are allowed into Canada who they disappear. Then it's our inland officers who then have to find them and remove them, so you're adding additional burdens down the road.
Guys, I'm frankly stunned that that's real. That was someone from the Canada Border Services Agency yesterday speaking in a committee hearing in Ottawa. If you need to hear that again, go back and hear it again. It is real. That's what's going on in our country. That's what our government thinks is okay. Are you okay with that? Do you see any potential issues with what we're doing? Any at all? This, as far as I'm concerned, is... I mean, I don't know that I trust our government anymore to do the day-to-day operations of running a country. If they think that's okay and that the Canadian people are fine under that system, then frankly, I'm shocked. But maybe I shouldn't be shocked, thinking about how immigration has been run in this country for the last number of years. Let me play for you another exchange. This is... I believe he's Cambridge South Hespeler, if I've got that right. I think he's my mom's member of parliament. Matt Strauss was in a committee hearing, and he was questioning Liberal Immigration Minister Lena Diab about some of the things that are going on in our system. Listen to this exchange between Conservative Matt Strauss and Liberal Immigration Minister Lena Diab.
Mr. Diab, I had to check. I mean, we all know you as the Minister of Immigration, but you are the Minister of Refugees as well. And so I guess I was dumbfounded when you said that you don't know what % of refugee claims are ultimately accepted in the last round.
I do not. I can go on the website and check, and I'm sure
maybe you should.
Colleagues can do that. We can definitely follow up with you.
Okay, I mean, that was 20 minutes ago. When somebody's refugee claim is denied, do they continue to receive benefits from IFHP?
No, when it's denied, it follows through the process. Once the process is concluded, it ends.
Just to be clear, even after their refugee claim is denied, we don't stop their benefits there. There's going to be more. We don't cut them off the second their refugee claim is denied. Okay, that's right from the government.
And it's really important for the Canadians following along at home to understand. So this program, the $900 million program, includes pharmaceuticals and vision care and mental health counseling and assistive devices and physiotherapy and occupational speech therapy and all sorts of things that seniors in Kitchener do not get unless they have supplemental health coverage. I asked you, if somebody's refugee claim is denied, do they continue to get all of this coverage? And you said no. Here I have your website. It says, as a refugee claimant, you'll get IFHP coverage if your claim for refugee protection has been rejected by the IRB. So did you lie to the committee, or is your website lying?
Excuse me?
I said, did you lie to the committee, or is your website lying?
Be careful with the language, Mr. Strauss.
Did you mislead the committee, or is the website misleading?
Not in the job of doing that. Thank you very much. It's not something that is in my dictionary either. So what I said is the interim federal health program provides temporary health care coverage to address urgent and essential medical needs for refugees and asylum claimants while they wait to become eligible for provincial and territorial health insurance plans. And then I
asked, if your refugee claim is denied, do you continue to receive coverage? And here your website says you continue to receive coverage if your claim is denied, if your refugee claim is denied by IRB.
I said they continue to receive claims until all the refugee process is concluded.
So what part of the process comes after the claim being denied by IRB?
Well, again, it's the IRB that takes care of that. There is a process, and there is a legal process.
So I'm to understand that you, as the minister who looks after this interim federal health program, who is the Minister of Refugees, doesn't know what part of the process comes after the IRB denying your refugee claim?
Well, again, if I put the chapeau on my hat when I was a lawyer, people can appeal, or there could be other considerations. So again, this is not.
Thank you. I'd like to yield my time over to to Dan Mazur.
Kick them out. Get rid of them. If they are taking advantage of our social safety net by making a bogus refugee claim, and then that claim is ultimately denied, there's no second chances. The benefits stop right then and there. No, you don't get to stay on while you appeal and go through all of the other processes. That's actually crazy. I find that contemptible, that's how the system is operating. Not surprising. Not at all surprising. I think that we should all be prepared for the fact that there's a chance that maybe these people don't know what they're doing. You just heard what sounded clearly like a very intelligent woman, right? No, you didn't actually. She sounds like she doesn't even know her own file. That is the immigration minister, also responsible for refugees, and doesn't even have basic information on her own file. How does she still have a job? How is that a thing? It's completely crazy. But I got to move on. I told you I'd hit as many topics as I could in this episode. Now I'm going to go to 3I Atlas. Yesterday, NASA held a news conference. They wanted to talk about whatever this thing is out in space. They say it is definitely a comet. Listen to this before I play a rebuttal.
As Courtney noted, a NASA-funded telescope, the Atlas Survey Telescope in Chile, first reported observations of the comet on July 1st, 2025 to the Minor Planet Center. And NASA has been tracking and studying Comet 3I Atlas ever since. We're here today to give you the latest of what we know about Comet 3I Atlas and what we still want to know. But first, what is a comet? It's a small, natural, solid body that is a combination of rocky and icy material that evaporates as it warms when it's close to a star, like the sun. But to start with, I'd like to address the rumors right at the beginning. I think it's important that we talk about that. This object is a comet. It looks and behaves like a comet and all evidence points to it being a comet. But this one came from outside the solar system, which makes it fascinating, exciting, and scientifically very important. This is only the third interstellar object like this that humanity has ever found. And a little bit more about the rumors. I think it's very important, and I'm actually very excited that a lot of the world was speculating about the comet while NASA was in a period where we couldn't speak about it due to the recent government shutdown. I think what I took away from that whole experience and watching that as we were working during the shutdown was just how interested and how excited people were about the possibility of what this comet could be. There was a lot of speculation about what it could be, but what I think is really awesome is that folks were interested in this incredible finding that we observed and that came from the heavens, and what that means, what it could mean about how magical the universe could be. It expanded people's brains to think about how magical the universe could be. And I'll tell you, here at NASA, we think that every day, and so it's really great that you were able to join us while we were not able to comment because of the shutdown constraints about what that comet is, because we think the universe is a magical place, and we spend your treasure and we spend all of our time trying to make sure that we explore that and share with you as much as we can. In fact, we want very much to find signs of life in the universe. In fact, just a few months ago, we were with you and we talked about what we think might be the signal from ancient life on the surface of Mars, from our amazing machines that have been roving the planet for 30 years to look for those things. That is something that's really important for us to learn about and discover. It could be an amazing discovery if and when we can confirm that. But 3I Atlas is a comet.
Okay, right from the horse's mouth, that was one of the chief science officers at NASA saying, we like that you were interested. We heard the chatter. It was interesting to hear, but it's a comet. It's not an alien. Then there was some callers that called in and got to ask questions of the panels. Here is one of the questions that I think is worth playing for you.
I have two questions for anybody who would care to answer. One is, did any of you seriously did you take seriously the proposition from some that this could be an alien spacecraft? I doubt you did, but I'm asking the question anyway. And number two, is there any evidence you see in any of the data you have that would fit an explanation like that? Or as far as you're concerned, does all of this data say conclusively that this is simply a comet that happens to be passing through the solar system? Thanks.
So I'll take that one, Bill, and thanks for the question. We love all of the different science and all of the different kind of hypotheses into what these things can be. When you start seeing something, you just got to point. It's natural to wonder what it is. And we actually love, as Amit said, we love that the world wondered along with us. And that's such a cool thing. We certainly were able, because of the measurements that Sean described from the astrophysics telescopes that immediately turned on this object once we'd found it. And even, I was interested. I just learned that we'd actually gone back and actually seen it before we even found it. So that was super cool. I just heard that from Sean. But we were very quickly able to look for sort of the easiest thing to do. I'll put it in a different way. Is if you understand comets pretty well and you understand asteroids pretty well, you kind of know the signatures that you're looking for, and so you can sort of look for those quickly and tick them off and say, yep, it really does behave like a comet. The interesting thing that Tom, I know if I throw this to him in a second, he's going to geek out about it. But the really cool thing about this is the differences, because it comes from somewhere else, and that's why we're so excited about it. It's only the third time that we've been able to identify and track something coming from outside our own solar system. We've long predicted these things occur, and now, of course, we know better how to look for them, and we now have this amazing Atlas Officer Ray. We're expecting we'll find a lot more of them. But it was quick. We were quick to be able to say, yep, it definitely behaves like a comet. We certainly haven't seen any technosignatures or anything from it that would lead us to believe it was anything other than a comet. But the super cool thing is not that it's exactly like all the comets that we see in our solar system. It's the differences that are so tantalizing for us as it gives me goosebumps too. It could be from something that existed before our own solar system. That is so cool.
Okay, she thinks it's cool. She made that very clear. And I'm not really sure that she answered the specific question, though. We want to know, did you rule out everything to suggest that it must be a comet? Did you do that? And I'm not 100% sure that they did. The person who has been leading the charge on this likely being an alien spaceship and not a comet is Professor Avi Loeb from Harvard. He did a response yesterday. It was on Newsmax. And one of the things he commented on is how bad the picture is. If you didn't see the picture of 3i Atlas that NASA released yesterday, you can probably picture it. If you've ever tried to take a picture of the moon with your iPhone, you know it comes out blurry and distant. That's exactly what this looked like, and it shouldn't. Amateur astronomers on Earth using telescopes that you can buy anywhere on Earth got better pictures than NASA was able to get using telescopes and cameras that are actually in space. It seems a little dishonest that they're saying that's the best they could get. I don't understand how that's the best they could get. Here is Professor Avi Loeb yesterday on Newsmax offering a little bit of a rebuttal.
I look at that picture and all those dots look the same to me. So tell me, why? Tell me about this picture that we just saw showing the comet.
Well, there were no new insights as to the properties of this object. From this NASA press conference, they pretty much repeated things that we already knew. We knew about the Hubble data, the Webb telescope data, and then the new data, for example, the image from the high-rise camera on board the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter that should have been the sharpest that we have, just showed a fuzzy ball of light similar to the Hubble image that we already saw before. And there was some data from MAVEN on Mars that indicated hydrogen, but these are details. Nothing in the big picture changed. And, the point is that the presenters should have emphasized what we don't understand rather than insist about what is familiar. And, as I say, the foundation of science is the humility to learn something new rather than the arrogance of expertise. That's what the public resonates with. And I pointed out 12 anomalies about this object. The most important among them is the size. This object is a million times more massive than the first interstellar object, 1,000 times more massive than the second interstellar object. And why didn't we see millions?
Let me ask you about that.
Yeah.
Though you talk about those interstellar objects, and I was doing a little research, and this is the third one. This one right now is the third one. And the first one was in 2017. The second one is 2019. Are you telling me that none ever happened before 2017? And if none ever happened before 2017, how come we're suddenly now getting 3 in 8 years?
No, there were many that passed before. It's just that we didn't have.
There's nothing necessarily to say he's right. There's nothing necessarily, though, to say he's wrong either. NASA says they're convinced this has to be a comet. Dr. or Professor Avi Loeb there, he wants to believe that this is an alien spaceship that's being propelled, not just drifting through our solar system en route to wherever it is going. We'll find out December 19th. December 19th is the day when it is going to be closest to Earth. December 19th. Now, why is December 19th an interesting date? Well, December 19th is the day we get the Epstein files. The Department of Justice was given 30 days to release the Epstein files. 30 days from yesterday is December 19th. So on December 19th, Are we going to be pouring through the Epstein files, trying to figure out which names are in there and who did what to kids? Or are people going to be looking up at the sky, wondering if there's about to be an alien invasion? I mean, that might lend a little bit of credibility to something that is definitely a conspiracy theory, but a lot of people believe is true. Project Bluebeam. And if you want to look up Project Bluebeam, go ahead. I'm not saying there's any credibility whatsoever to it, but I will acknowledge there's a lot of folks out there that think it's true. You go ahead and give that a listen. By the way, I mentioned the Epstein files are coming out on the 19th. I want to play for you a little bit of audio surrounding the Epstein files, stuff that I think you should hear. I'm going to start off with yesterday, a news conference that was held by Pam Bondi, the U.S. Attorney General, Kash Patel, Director of the FBI, and more. They were asked specifically about what's going to get released in 30 days.
Madam Attorney General, do you mean that you will provide all the files by 30 days?
We will follow the law. The law passed both chambers last evening. It has not yet been signed, but we will continue to follow the law, again, while protecting victims, but also providing maximum transparency.
Madam Attorney General, the DOJ statement earlier this year saying that the files would not release mentioned the fact that the review of the documents and the evidence did not suggest that any additional investigation of third parties was warranted. What changed since then that you launched this investigation?
Information that has come for information. There's information that new information, additional information, and again, we will continue to follow the law, to investigate any leads. If there are any victims, we encourage all victims to come forward, and we will continue to provide maximum transparency under the law.
I'm not really sure that we're getting what she calls maximum transparency here. It wasn't that long ago that Kash Patel, again, director of the FBI, stood up and said there are no Epstein files. We thought we'd find a whole bunch of stuff, but we never found anything. There are no Epstein files, basically, is what he said. He said there's nothing that the public is looking for. There's no smoking gun. That's it. Forget about it. The Epstein case is closed. That's basically what he said. Now Pam Bondi is saying, well, new information has come forward. Well, that's an interesting one simply because there is a provision here in these files that get released that they won't release files necessarily if there is an active ongoing investigation related to that particular part of the Epstein files. Is it possible that the Department of Justice or the FBI decides they're going to open an investigation into Bill Clinton? Well, if they do open an investigation into Bill Clinton, that means they don't release the files from Epstein that pertain to Bill Clinton. I'm really curious to see what's going to happen on December 19th. I want all the files, all of it, full stop. That's what Congress approved. Release all the files. You know who else is right on this topic alongside me here is Tucker Carlson. I played some audio from him yesterday. I'm going to play him again today. This is him doing a podcast appearance. Listen to his take on the Epstein files.
But how can you say that thousands of children were raped, but I'm not going to find out who raped them? Yeah. How can you say that? I agree completely. They said that. By the way, when Pam Bondi went on television and said, I have a videotape of kids getting abused, I followed this case closely, and I know a lot of the people involved, as I've told you. Mm-hmm. I had no idea. I didn't know that. Really? Thousands of children got raped? Yeah. Who raped them? Where are the rapists? Like, why aren't they in jail? This is the Department of Justice.
Yes.
That is so crazy. This is honestly one of the craziest things I've ever seen in my entire life. And I just think it's very dangerous to play around with this stuff. Like, very dangerous.
Well,
I don't want a revolution, but if you wanted a revolution, this is how you would act.
Yes.
Very, very, oh boy, I'm not. That was Tucker Carlson's words. I am not calling for a revolution. But either way, I think we can all agree the way this has been handled by the Department of Justice and the FBI is certainly bizarre. There's a lot of things here that are not adding up, and they told us they were going to release the files. Then they told us there are no files. Now apparently they're getting ready to release the files. They said there was video, but we might not see the video. In fact, we definitely won't. They're not going to do that because it would have victims in it. That makes me wonder, though, do you actually have the video or did you make that up? What a great way to get the public furious with their government if the government continues to obstruct the people from finding out what went on here. Kind of on the same topic, but off topic, I'm going to move now to another committee hearing that happened yesterday in Ottawa. This is a Conservative member of Parliament. I believe it's Andrew Lawton, who's great, by the way. He does such a good job in his riding for his constituents and in the House of Commons, particularly, though, in his committee work. He's really great at asking questions. He was asking the Liberal Secretary of State for Children about the recent Supreme Court decision that said mandatory minimum sentences for those with child porn are unconstitutional.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Secretary, for being here today. You mentioned earlier a statement I hope is accurate, that everyone in this room is committed to protecting the most vulnerable, and by which, obviously, in your portfolio, it's children. So would that be fair that your portfolio, as the Secretary of State for Children and Youth, is about the well-being of children and youth in Canada?
Yes.
Okay. That wasn't a trick question. I appreciate your candor on that and giving a simple answer. I'm assuming are aware that a few weeks ago, the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that a mandatory minimum sentence for someone convicted of possessing and sharing child sexual exploitation and abuse material was cruel and unusual punishment, that a mandatory minimum sentence of even just 1 year. Now, the cases that led to this, in one of them, a gentleman from Quebec who had 317 images of children constituting what the court called child pornography. Of those images, 90% were, and I'm quoting the court decision, of young girls between 3 and 6 years of age, some showing victims being subjected to acts of penetration and sodomy committed by adults and minors. The other case involved another man, also from Quebec, who had 531 images, 274 videos of children from 5 to 10 years of age being subjected to sexual abuse, such as fellatio and vaginal and anal penetration by adults. And I do not enjoy reading those words. I know no one in this room enjoys hearing them. Do you believe that a mandatory minimum sentence of 1 year is cruel and unusual punishment?
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, is this within the bounds of the committee and certainly within the Secretary of State's portfolio? I think the member opposite would be...
On the same point of order, Mr. Chair, in her very first response, the Secretary of State said her role is...
Mr. Lawton, it is outside of the matter currently before the committee.
Chair, point of order, I'll challenge the chair on that.
Okay. I'm going to spend for 2 minutes. I'm going to spend.
Spoiler alert, she never did answer the question. She gave a brief statement in French so that it wouldn't show up on English television, and then they closed down the committee proceeding. That's your government. That's someone who is charged with protecting the safety and well-being of children in our country. Couldn't answer that very basic question. And by the way, yes, that Supreme Court decision involved all of the things that Andrew Lawton talked about. I got choked up listening to that. That's what those kids were subjected to in Canada. Stuff like this is happening. And it is sick and it is gross. But we have institutions in this country that are supposed to step up and protect children. They didn't do their job. The Supreme Court says it's cruel and unusual punishment to give people who share that stuff an even 1 year minimum sentence. Cruel and unusual punishment. That's what the Supreme Court said. And when the parliamentary secretary had an opportunity to right the wrong there, to condemn the Supreme Court's decision, to call it out, maybe even to announce we're going to use the Notwithstanding Clause to overrule the Supreme Court because we believe there should be a mandatory minimum sentence, jail time, for people who abuse children in fashion like was described there. they should go to jail. The parliamentary secretary, this liberal parliamentary secretary for children and youth, wouldn't do it. Shut down the proceeding, brief statement in French. That was the end of it. I can't be the only one who finds that outrageous. I can't be. To me, an issue like that is a deal breaker. If we had a government in Ottawa that I actually liked, and no, I don't like this current crop in Ottawa. I don't. But if we had a government that I liked, and I liked everything about their policy, but they couldn't bring themselves to condemn a Supreme Court decision that says it's cruel and unusual punishment to put people sharing intimate images of children. And again, 3 to 10 years old is the bulk of them. You heard what they did. You heard. They can't say that that's cruel and unusual punishment. That issue alone would make me change my mind about that government and supporting them, because I will never support someone who supports that. And if you're not going to condemn it, if you're not going to call it out, if you're not going to do a goddamn thing about it, then you're supporting it. And that's all there is to it. That is this government in Ottawa. You know what? I know it sucks to have to listen to what he said. You should rewind this and go back and listen to what Andrew Lawton said. Listen to what they did to those girls and those boys. Listen to it again. And then listen to that sorry excuse of a politician who wouldn't call out the Supreme Court. Wouldn't, right then and there, commit to using the Notwithstanding Clause to overrule that gross decision. Sick. One more thing I got to cover. The U.S. Ambassador, Pete Hoekstra, brought up the 51st state again. I haven't even heard this one in advance. Let's give it a listen, see what he said. He was doing a speech at a conference. It was like a fireside chat kind of deal. And I haven't heard this clip, so we're going to listen to this one together for the first time.
But let me tell you, I go around the country and people will say, Pete, you just don't understand why we're so mad about the 51st state. It's kind of like, yeah, you're right, I don't. Okay? Well, and then I read, all I can say is to my Canadian friends is, you don't understand, because I read the media and I listen to other discussions, the president got mad about an ad. Well, I've been in this business for a while, and I know people who've been in it longer than I have. And I asked them, okay, the ad that was run by the government of Canada, oh, that's not the government of Canada, it's Ontario. It's kind of like, I'm sorry, we don't go through that, slicing and dicing, and it's kind of like, no one can ever remember a like circumstance where a foreign government came into the United States and, they were talking about $54 million of ads, American dollars, so real money. Just a joke, okay, lighten up. That's the quote they're going to come in trouble. But, targeting the President of the United States and his policies 10 days before an election and a couple of weeks before a Supreme Court case would be heard in front of the Supreme Court. I'm sorry, that does not happen in the United States of America.
Okay, so he is certainly accusing Premier Doug Ford of really screwing this one up and interfering in U.S. politics, trying to influence elections, trying to influence Supreme Court decisions. That's fine. He's welcome to feel that way. He said, no, he doesn't fully understand why Canada was so upset about the 51st state. I'll tell you why, because we're proud of our country. We're a little embarrassed about it right now, but we're still proud of our country, and we still think there's something to salvage here, and we still think there's something worth fighting for. No, we don't just want to bow down because Donald Trump said you should be the 51st state and become the 51st state. We're not going to go down without a fight here trying to save our country. And there are patriots that are left, patriots that are right, that are all working to try and save our country. We just disagree on the best way forward on how to do that, if it's even possible at this point, because we're going to be flat out broke pretty quick. When it comes to election interference, though, I'll just circle back on that. Is it fair to point out how much Donald Trump interfered in our election? He did. That 51st state stuff, he admitted he was trolling Trudeau, and it just caught on, so he kept doing it. That was gross interference in our election. No, he didn't take out some well-produced ad and run it on Canadian radio and television. That would have been egregious. That's actually what we did to them. But he did grossly interfere in our election. He even came out and said he had a favorite. He liked Mark Carney better. Got the elbows up crowd all fired up. Now, he did that for selfish reasons because he wanted Canada in the situation that Canada's in. He didn't want to have to deal with Pierre Poilievre. It was going to be a tough negotiation. Pierre could have walked away and said, you know what? We don't need you. We're going to totally take advantage of our resources. We'll have a pipeline built faster than you've ever seen one built. And then we don't need you at all. Look out. Trump didn't want to deal with that drama. He wanted capitulation. He wanted agreement. He wanted consensus. Trump was outraged when Doug Ford ran that ad in America because it worked. Like it or not, agree or disagree with running the ad, you can't deny that it worked. It certainly got everybody's attention. Now, it also really backfired in that negotiations are still off, and the ambassador here, I'm told, said they're not coming back anytime soon. So we're stuck in this situation now. We are. But Trump interfered in our election, too. How different would this country be if we'd had a federal election like we were gonna? No talk from Donald Trump, no 51st state. We were just talking about the issues affecting Canadians, the economy, housing, crime and punishment, and so on and so forth. Would have been a very different election, and we would be in a very different situation right now. So the election interference goes both ways, and if you ask me, Trump started it in this particular case. Gotta go, friends. Listener DMs tomorrow. I will see you here for that. Again, it's at Scott Fox on air on Instagram, X. Those are my two preferences. You can find me on Facebook, and I don't always check the other apps, but you can try if you want. Have yourselves a great day. I'll see you tomorrow. Anna's going to join me for Listener DMs, and I leave you today with the sounds of Pat, James, and the whole truth. Hey now. Oh.